are they actually selling? They're selling time. Well, time is finite. A problem well studied will suggest its own solution. I always want to be a master student. I want to be a master teacher. I was late to AI, obviously, but AI was late to me. It's important to keep a couple of things straight. One is your thirst for knowledge. Two is your health. It is not about them becoming you. It's about them becoming them better self. Now, by the way, if you don't get the lesson, don't worry. You'll get another chance at it, okay? Those same people will show up again. That same circumstance will show up again. If this worked for you, what would be different?
What do you wish to leave behind as a legacy to the next generation? Michael, after 2 years, we're finally here, which I'm so excited about. You've been a mentor, a friend, a role model for me the past 2.5 years at this point. I was so lucky to meet you through Dawn, your daughter, who was my friend, I think, starting back in 2019 or something like that. So we've stayed in touch. I was going through some things, and then she was like, call my dad. So I did. We're here at International Services, and we are sitting in Chicago, which is very exciting. You are not only a principal on the board of directors, you were in the military for 10 years, you were a Harvard business professor, you have had so many different lives and have been in consulting for over 45 years. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about not only this business, but your life, because that to me is the most exciting part. When I first met you, you gave me a quote about mentorship. You said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. What does that mean?
Well, I think if we look at the trajectory of our life experience, both personally and in business, we take a journey. And in the beginning of the journey, we have parents and friends, and then we go through an education process in America. And so at that point, I would say we are students, gathering information to prepare us for the life's adventure ahead. As we mature, both in personally and in business, we have another mission, which is, of course, to some degree, three things, and which is to create abundance. And from a business point of view, that involves three things, in my opinion: positive cash flow, profit, and ease of operations. And ease of operations is not easy operations. Ease of operations is having an accountable, scalable, measurable, and effective functional organization that works for you, not against you. So you can actually work on the business rather than be trapped in the business. Keeping your abundance is about limiting your legal liabilities and taxes as your prosperity grows. And why would we do that anyhow? And that is, the overall mission is to do those things and create that energy, so in order to have a higher quality of life. And if we get to those stages, I feel like we have an obligation or a responsibility to go back and mentor, educate people, as I've done in your case a couple of times, and also with growing a company. And so we always, no matter what stage we're at, we want to be what I call master students. And by being master students, we can then become master teachers if we wish. The issue is one has to be committed as a master student, and one has to be committed as a master teacher. So that's what I meant by that.
Such a beautiful thing, and so many lessons that you taught me within this period of time when I was trying to buy a business and create a succession plan, I have kept to heart, and I'm excited to go through today. Something that you talked about when I was feeling really stuck in my life was the door to realization. You said you were holding many keys, and I kept trying all the keys. I was like, why are none of these keys opening this door that feels locked to me and is blocking me from my future? But little did I know the door was actually unlocked. I was the one standing in my own way, and that is something that I've kept.
Well, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs, and of course there's a difference in my mind between a business owner and being a business leader. Business owners own a business. They may or may not have all the skill set. Entrepreneur and business men and women create vision, leadership, effective communication in order to create greater abundance and to keep it. In the case of the key situation, what happens is entrepreneurs and individuals go through life going through what I call an activity trap. They're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And then they're looking for the answer, and they may or may not find the answer. So in their quest for looking at that, they're like the magical keychain with all of the skeleton keys, dating myself, and essentially they're putting them in the lock. What they don't realize is the door is open to begin with. And so as we take this journey, both in business and personally, we really want to make sure we don't get so consumed in the business, which is so easy to do, that we lose sight of the other opportunities in our life. So at the later point, and I'm 81, you go back and some people look at it and basically are wondering, well, where's the beef kind of thing? Or they're looking forward to retirement, but they're afraid of it. Now, I'm not a guy for retiring. Everybody knows that. I'm a non-recovering workaholic that's not in a 12-step program. And I'm proud of it. So our journey to abundance is really about a predetermined outcome, which is generally considered by most people to be a higher quality of life, however you define it. And sometimes in our journey around entrepreneurship, we get so enmeshed in that, particularly for small and business owners. And then we have our secrets. Shall I share my struggle, my failures with my spouse or significant other? Will they support me at those times? Because I always say a good friend is somebody that knows your faults but likes you anyhow. I think that's what it's about. The other one is, in today's world of business, we also want to identify, attract, and get a group of people to work in harmony on our journey to profitability and abundance. And so we need to create a great place to work. Years ago, there was a book about going from good to great. Well, that's a journey in business, but it's really a parallel to what we should be doing in our own lives. And that will create employees that are thrilled to be in our business, that understand our mission because we've communicated it effectively. And we want to be a place that people want to be at, they want to be successful at, and they want to serve their clientele. In our case, we serve people, we're not a manufacturing company, but either way, we want to create excellence, and we need to be clear about how we define that excellence. So that's part of that journey.
And something you're really good at doing is drawing the parallel between how you act in business and in life.
Right.
So I want to know a little bit more about your life. You're not only a CEO, a board member, all these amazing titles, an executive, but you're a husband, you're a father of 2 daughters, one of which I'm very close with. Dawn shared with me a core memory of her being about 7 or 8 years old and having matching Nike shoes to you. She said that her sister Jess and you had horses in common, which we'll get into, but she just loved those blue Nike shoes.
Well, my 2 girls, I have 2 girls and 7 grandchildren and 3 or so great-grandchildren, and they're all for sale. It's just that restocking fee is going to be a little high. But aside from that, my 2 girls had some of the most expensive hobbies. One, I'm a great equestrian horse person in dressage, but my other daughter, Dawn, was into airplanes. So that's why I kept busy, and that's why I guess I still have to keep busy, is that, they have an expression in horses that's like, how do you make $1 million in horses? And that's just start with 10 million, So the kids is interesting. Today they're wonderful adults. They have children, and in Jess's case, grandchildren. I think the story there, good or bad, is that in the process of creating a large corporation, I didn't really have that much time. And today I travel about 300,000 miles a year. And while I have a lot of bonus points from the airlines, I really don't use them myself. I give them round to the children and the grandchildren. I think there's a good story of an area that I could have probably done better, in that being on the road so much and traveling that level, it's difficult to maintain the kind of relationship others dream of, I guess. And that is where you spend a lot of time with the kids, whether in the growth period, the education period, the religious side of it, the morality side of it. And those are things that originally I left to my previous wife. And she did a great job, but I think looking back on it, I could have probably done a little better job. But we all look back, and there's some things we really love and some things we probably could do better, and that's probably one of them,
Well, Dawn looks up to you, as do I, and I just thought that was very sweet that she shared that little story with me. But your early life, what is one value that your parents instilled in you that you still live by to this day?
Strong work ethic. When I was growing up, I had a challenging youth when I was dyslexic, and therefore, to overcome that, And we didn't really call it that. We called it remedial reading in those days. And there was a book put out called Why Johnny Can't Read. So the answer to that was I had a lady, a protege of a guy named Dr. Dewey at Harvard. And his position was you needed to be balanced in education and in physical things as well. So the work ethic started when I was about in the second or third grade. Instead of going after school to athletics or something like that, I went to a private tutor 5 days a week. And that would be out of school, let's say at 3 o'clock. And I would be with that person till about 5 or 6, go home, have dinner. And as I got older, homework. That was kind of a turning point or a fundamental building block, which was in order to meet some of the requirements of youth and later as adulthood, a strong work ethic was pretty important. That's kind of stayed with me to the present. I mean, I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, I exercise and start going to work. I meet with my clients around 7:30. Generally don't take a lunch break, work straight through until about 5 or 6, have dinner, and then do some homework with the client issues. So that's gone on for 51 years, and so I love it. But I think that basic thing about a very fundamental thing was work ethic. And Tyler and Tanya have spoken of that as well. It's really important to, when you have a task, face your task, do your task, and to commit yourself to doing it as well as you can. And some days that's not so popular with other less mature folks.
Sure. You said education is step one. Actionable knowledge is what creates results. Why did you decide to go into law and accounting? It's amazing that you overcame and figured out a way to get over dyslexia and work with your brain. And it's just amazing to me that you got 2 majors in things that seemingly have to be very XYZ and very different as well.
Well, one is quantitative and the other one is what I call logical thinking. Not that they're separated, but accounting is around numbers. And there's really 2 types of numbers. There's accounting for accountants and then there's accounting for owners. Accounting for accountants is what I call generally accepted accounting principles or guidelines under the American Institute of Certified Public Accounting. To me, that was kind of logical. In other words, we have revenue, the energy to do it, which is called cost of goods sold, then what I call the ash and trash, which is general and administrative, and then we subtract, and small business owners do this all the time. They look at the top line and the bottom line. And so there's actually 2 types of profit, and they only know one, the one about net profit. Then there's another one called what I call engineered profit. That's about what should your minimum mandatory revenue be, which is greater than what you have now, and then what should your engineered pre-tax profit be, and figure that out as a percentage coming off your cost of goods sold. And so those are educational opportunities for clients to build greater abundance. On the legal side is really a question of logical thinking. There's all sorts of law. There's obviously litigation, there's corporate law, there's some other things. I thought of law more not as a practice, but more as a way of dealing with the world, which is very litigious. So we've gone from, in the old days, I did work with people in a handshake, and that doesn't seem to be effective anymore. So we have a series of rules and regulations on how we provide and compose ourselves in business intercourse. So I figured years ago, when I was working in my grandfather's business, that it was important to memorialize things in writing so that there was clarity. Also, when you're working with multi-generational situations and somebody would say, well, my father said that, and you say, well, I'm not sure that that's what he meant. Having things in a little more of a structure, which is what one learns in the legal side, can be very, very helpful. So they should complement each other. What happens in entrepreneurship is we're trying to get our business going, create revenue, clients, profitability. But then as you get more mature, what do you do with that abundance? Well, you have to limit your legal liabilities through entity structuring and other means, and then you want to minimize your taxes. So that's when the 2 come together, because small business owners can have called an S corporation or a limited liability corporation or a partnership, which can be structured in many ways, but from a tax point of view, they go from what's called an 11S tax return where the profit or loss passes through to their personal 1040. And how that gets managed as one matures in a small company is really important. And I find there's a gap there with small business owners, men and women, that never really got that explained to them for a couple of legitimate reasons. First of all, accountants do accounting, and they are risk-averse folks with respect the management of the company. And since the incident with Enron, an accounting firm's advice and rendered themselves virtually bankrupt, created a ripple effect for losing 1,500 employees and severely damaging a community. Accountants now don't do that, okay? That's why they have big disclaimers. On the other side is when you're making abundance, then you have to think about as an owner, should I take greater wages? Do I invest in my business? Do I put money aside in retirement? What do I do for my employees? And then what is the best way to structure that to minimize my taxes? So they come together. Small business owners don't necessarily need a board of directors, but they should have what I call a TAG, a technical advisory group of people that they may or may not pay that bring that skill set to educate them at least on an annual, if not semi-annual basis. Now, from a consulting point of view, we create action objectives that we actually work with the client to do. We don't just leave a study that says this is what you should do. We hold ourselves accountable for doing it and assuring that the client has a 2-to-1 return on their investment with us. And we're very serious about that. So when the clients get more mature at any time, they should surround themselves with advisors that they trust, that they call together to bring together these different aspects, finance, accounting, law, taxes, and put them all together in the same room once or twice a year so that you can get the benefit of that knowledge at one time and then build that as you go forward. And you don't necessarily need a board of directors with certain provisions therein for protecting them, but it's more for educating and growth. And so I think that's important for all small business. Well, it doesn't even matter. I think that one should do that. Even publicly held companies do that.
Right.
So that's why I do that.
And you're embracing AI, which I absolutely love at the age of 81. I don't want to generalize, but I think some of the older generations are a little bit more hesitant to lean into that. But you are using Claude daily, and you've talked about that being a benefit. When you talk about a board of advisors, a group of advisors for small business owners, is AI one of those?
It may be. I was late to AI, obviously, but AI was late to me. So I think what happened there is artificial intelligence is a way of accessing knowledge in a way you couldn't do before as quickly. And in my case, I generally used to spend on site and doing homework in my hotel approximately 11 or 12 hours after meeting with the client when I was done at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. With the use of AI as a tool, I've now got that down, limited that time for 8 or 9 hours to about 45 minutes, which allows me to see things in a little different way. I think AI is an opportunity to expand our possibilities. You have to be a little careful with AI because it may not be the exact accurate answer to your question, but it is a guide. It's a tool. It's not the solution. It's a toolkit into the solution. You can try, and depending on your level of knowledge, I find that you need to have a support group, but first understand the structure of what you're doing. A lot of people have guide or artificial intelligence develop a structure. In my case, I had a structure I've been using for 50 some odd years, and I was able to apply AI to that structure and to enhance it. Results were pretty dramatic in my case. First of all, it took about 3 weeks, 2.5 to 3.5 weeks to get the tool compatible with me or me with it. The output was incredible. But the upside was that it helped me to be more effective with my clients, and I was already pretty effective, but it probably more than doubled that effectiveness. Quantitatively, it resulted in almost 2.5 times the revenue. And I was able to utilize the tool to learn how to do things better. The consequence is you have to be willing to have a guide in that process. And it doesn't have to be somebody that understands your business. Sometimes it's even better if it's not. But I did a double-blind work. One, I utilized one of our internal resource AI people to develop a tool, and we started in January. The tool has not yet been finished. So on a double blind, I also used an outside consultant that I was very familiar with, and we produced that result in about 2.5, 3 weeks, and that has been now pretty well perfected. So that's been an interesting lesson. One is the level of commitment you bring to it, and that's knowledge. It's not blind knowledge, it's understanding the outcome. So the question then becomes, where do you want to be or where do you want to get to? That's really clear for all entrepreneurs, because some of them start as technicians in a business, an electrician, a plumber, a manufacturer, a fabricator, a designer. And what they do is they become really good at the plumbing, electrical machinist. Then they say, I could do better if I was working by myself. Yeah. I mean, the old man in Dallas is utilizing my skill and talent to make a great deal of wealth. And whatever they think, their position always is the old man's making more than I do, and I'm doing all the work. So there is a group of people that feel that way. So then they say, but I could start myself. Well, maybe I could do better if I went on my own. And in fact, they prove in many cases that they're right. They go out and they go to certain clients and customers, new or existing, and they say, if I were to do the work for you without all that overhead, would that be helpful for you? And they go, sure, Bob, you've always done a great job for me. So they start off and they have a pickup truck or themselves, and they go out and they don't have a lot of overhead. Right. So they're very profitable. They're so successful that more people want their work, their time and effort. So what are they actually selling? They're selling time. Well, time is finite. So now they're working away, and now they got a lot of demand. So what's the next thing to do? They hire an assistant to help them be more effective. And now they've got the assistant in them, and they're in a pickup truck or a vehicle. Now they go out, and it's doing. So what's going on? Well, they're doing all that, and then at night, they or their spouse or significant other is actually doing the billing and collection. Okay, so now it gets really going. Okay, and so now the next thing is, they need an office. Now they need a bookkeeper. Now they need an administrative associate. And now they need more people, trucks and vehicles. So now their overhead costs went up, and their overall profitability in the short run went down. But they're still the master plumber, they're still the master electrician, they're still the master fabricator, but they're the owner of a business. Are they actually businessmen? Not exactly. They're caught up in the businessman spiral, and they're spinning their wheels, and they're going, well, what, and I'm even more busy than I was before, okay? So now the issue becomes that the business begins to run them, and they need guidance and help, particularly small business folks, to improve that. And that's where outside support can be helpful.
Right. And that's a huge value that you bring to the table for thousands of businesses over your career. You say there's a real difference between playing to win versus playing not to lose.
Right. And a lot of folks, as they move along in the business cycle, they start off with winning, like I say, when they're small, except that they're consuming time. So now they have very little time for their personal life because the business is consuming them. Now they get really successful. At some point, they get to the point where they necessarily don't want to get a whole lot bigger because of the problems. So they're playing not to win more, but they're playing not to lose. Yeah. When you start playing not to lose, you become you lack that enthusiasm for your business. You lack the entrepreneurial spirit. And in fact, what happens is when you're playing not to lose, you actually end up losing more than you would have if you had played to win. Because playing to win is pushing the boundaries of your knowledge, education, excitement. When you're playing not to lose, it's like, if I could just hold on long enough, somebody will show up and buy my business, or I'll retire, or whatever their story is. It doesn't quite work that way, but it sounds good. Yeah. It just, in my experience, doesn't work so yummy.
Yeah. And when did you learn that yourself?
I think I learned that when I was doing both the sales element and the consulting element, and it was consuming me. Yeah. And then I started to spend a lot of time in just maintaining the client base and not growing the client base, because it's easier to keep the existing customers, clients, than it is to spend time and effort, which is much more expensive, in developing new ones. Right. So I started to move away from that enthusiasm to protecting my business, which really wasn't, because then events occur sometimes out of our hands, the economy changes. I had a large healthcare consulting company earlier in my life, and I decided to get out of healthcare because it changed when we went to prospective rate reimbursement as opposed to cost-based reimbursement. And it was more collegial in the old days. And then when it got to being more of a competitive situation where the solo practice of medicine began to dry up, and we started getting physicians being part of a business relationship as employees, I kind of lost my enthusiasm for it.
And can you talk to me about the diagnosis of
Oh,
the
yeah.
problem
Yeah.
and how you flipped it on its head
Oh, yeah.
in sales?
Okay. So what happened was I decided that I was sort of like a participant in a teaching hospital in which I was running the radiology department. So at some points, I was a radiology technician taking the pictures of the business and what was going on in the business. I would hold it up and I would become the radiologist, and I would say, well, this is the diagnosis, the prognosis, and the treatment plan. So that was where we went now as a business. That got exciting because it was a way of explaining to the client the process in a way they could actually understand and demystify it. The financials sometimes seem to be a mystery to some people because they haven't been sufficiently educated. But you just say, let's look at this like a diagnosis and a prognosis. If we stayed on this type of path, where would we be? Are you going to be more ill? Are you going to be okay? Or do you want to be more healthy? Do you need to lose weight in your business, meaning your overhead cost is too high, or whatever? So I've used that in growing and expanding businesses to say, we need to do a better job on that, but first we ought to understand what we're actually doing. And some of us get stuck professionally just doing the diagnosis. And that's under the theory that a problem well studied will suggest its own solution, which sometimes is right and sometimes is not. So I've used this model for thousands of businesses, and it seems to be very helpful for them.
And it's amazing how you took your expertise and your experience in the healthcare industries and transferred it to all these other.
Right. It was a great, I find it up, people say, well, how did you come up with that? I go, I don't have any idea. One day I was in the shower and decided to come up with it. But it was, I would think my path has been integrative and inquisitive. So that as I went along, I was able to integrate some of the things that I'd done in previous life into where I'm going, with the idea that I always want to go forward. I always want to be a master student. I want to be a master teacher. And I want to explore it. And that's how I got into AI. And I didn't grow up with it. I didn't even grow up with computers. There was no cell phone when I was younger. Okay, and I remember when we had beepers and we had a pocket full of quarters, and so the beeper would go off, you go to the payphone, you put in a nickel or a dime or a quarter, and you call your office and say, what the hell's going on? Well, now there isn't even those beepers, not that way, and there definitely aren't any more payphones. So you have to change and adapt. And I find that exciting, not scary, because anytime you're going to a new place, personally, professionally, there has an element of excitement, and it also has an area of challenge. And I'm a guy that's always liked to overcome a challenge. I'm the guy that runs to a firefight, not a guy that runs the other way. And then to me, at my station in life, I think my role is to educate, motivate, and create a difference for owners through knowledge, particularly if it has a bottom line positive effect. And that's what I enjoy. And then I thought, well, if I could do that and use AI to make it more effective for me, then I could teach other people using the model, whether it was my model or not. Of course, being my model, I was always prejudiced that I had the best model, but we'll leave that aside. And then I could use that to teach people to make their life easier and thereby help them be more successful with the clients.
And then also quality of life, which you brought up earlier, and enhancing that for them as well.
Right. Well, the first thing you have to do is, it's one thing to talk about quality of life, but the other thing is define it. So I'm always asking questions of clients like, if this worked for you, what would be different? If you achieved a certain level of financial security or success, what would that mean to you? Was once one can identify those individual goals, then you can create a business that helps you meet those goals. And if you can't do that, then you probably have to look at something else, because that's the whole mission, is to help people create abundance, keep it, and use that energy to improve the quality of the life the way they define it, not the way I or somebody else defines it. And that's a different kind of mission. That requires a degree of not only commitment, but compatibility, where the client trusts you with some of the most personal issues that they may have or may have had or may have see themselves in the future. So having a guide can be of great value to them, but that means you have to have enough experience and integrity to be able to have an intelligent conversation with a client on those kind of issues.
So I think about my father, who owned a business and is now retired. But if you were to go to him, if we were to rewind about 7 to 10 years, and you went to him and asked him what he wants to improve in his quality of life, I don't know if he would have known, because that's all he knew. And he was an amazing mechanic and businessman and all the things, but what if you don't know? How do you help people figure out their quality of life and what that looks like if they're just so bogged down?
Well, sometimes I would ask a question like, now you got to remember, a lot of the clients I have are not achieving their objectives. Once in a while, they are. This week I met with a man that we started off, he had $8 million in his business. Today he has $32 million. He had not a functional organization. He was doing everything. And in the course of the work that we did with this gentleman, he learned to develop a functional organization. And today he only goes to his office 3 days a week. And he has a tremendous quality of life. He's a wonderful guy. Got a car, a very exotic Ford Shelby, of which there was only 60 made. Wow. And he got his a year or two before he got engaged with our company, and he had 57 miles on the car because he was crowned up with his business. And today he has 32,000 miles on his car. So I guess that's an accomplishment. But a frequent question to ask folks that haven't really defined their path forward is, what would it look like if your business was more successful dramatically? For example, if you're a $5 million company and now you're a $7.5 million company, and I know you don't think about it that way, Mr. Client, and the company was, let's say, a $7-8 million company, call it $8 million, and it was 10% profitable, so your pre-tax is $800,000 after you've paid everybody, including yourself. And you could do that on a sustainable basis for the next 3 years. You'd have $2.4 million built up over 3 years at that point. So what would it look like to you if your company was running that well and you didn't have to be as hard-pressed in it as you are today? So that kind of a question raises some interesting questions. Now, as I said, a lot of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s are what I call non-recovering workaholics that are not in the 12-step program and don't want to be, okay? Because they don't know how to be. Because basically the business has turned into not just a workplace, a job place, it's become an addiction. Yeah. And sometimes that addiction fails to address things like, does the individual's spouse or significant other have any idea the amount of stress that Bob and Mary is under? And do they even talk about it? And the answer is rarely. Because sometimes they're discouraged, sometimes they're ashamed, sometimes their own warts inhibit their conversation. And the truth is that they turn into kind of a couch potato, or they really are stuck. And so the question is, would you be willing to be unstuck? It's not a question of if you're going to be unstuck. The first question is, would you be willing? Because before you can do anything, you have to be willing. Now, we cannot make somebody willing. In order to be effective with a client or any relationship, it depends on trust and a certain level of commitment. It is not about them becoming you. It's about them becoming them better self, their better self in their business or whatever. And sometimes they get stuck. Sometimes they need therapy. We don't do therapy yet in our business.
I love therapy.
But therapy is a great thing to help people balance some of the things in their past, in their present, and where they're going, and to create more inner peace for them. In the British model, they believe medication is the way and the light and the word and the way. Today we do cognitive therapy, we do group therapy. Therapy is a healthy thing. It's also particularly healthy in a business. We actually do business therapy. We don't do individual psychological stuff. That's not our skill set, thank God. Okay, and so what we want to do is to develop the components of what I'll call a complete person, because sometimes they're not complete. They're just heavily active. As a matter of fact, their activity is sometimes an activity trap to prevent them from making a breakthrough in their life. And we masquerade that inside of the damn business. Well, that's less than optimal because we want to have, if you will, a man for all seasons or a woman for all seasons. I think sometimes it's harder for women than it is for men, although it's not gender specific. There's just different circumstances when you have a family, when you're, working full time, trying to grow your abundance, your leadership, your trust in an environment where those aren't common. And we'd like to see that become more common. That's why I'm pretty committed to women-owned businesses, but that's not so common. And also, of late, in the last 20 years, people have become more self-directed than outside-directed. It's what's in it for me. Okay, so we want to make the stories of their life the reality of their being. And so in order to do that, we are only a guide in that process. We get pretty active. We actually come in and do intervention in business. We create change, which is hard. And then we have to build a team within a company to embrace that change with the owner, not in spite of them. That environment creates opportunities not only for the business, but for the individual owner and the employees. The employees want to be at a place where they are making a difference in an environment which is positive. The leader wants to, I always say the responsibility of owners, which took me 20 years to get down into one sentence, is to identify, attract, and get a group of people to work in harmony to make a profit. And then I always say, how's that going? Because the working in harmony sometimes is easier said than done. So it's creating a harmonious environment where before and historically we've had conflict. We have the owners and the workers, okay? And sometimes the workers thought they knew more than the owner, and sometimes the owner was an autocrat who ruled the company. Well, that only works as long as you're there all the time, okay? And then it doesn't work so well. So I've had the good fortune to see it all working for 3 presidents and 2 leaders of countries. So what we want to do today is to create more harmony. Now, on the other side, the newer generation of workers are looking for self-fulfillment. And so the workplace becomes a place for 9 to 5 or whatever it is, and then they're happy because they don't have the responsibility of ownership. So on Friday, they have the weekend. Well, sometimes by Wednesday, they're working on the weekend, okay? So then the question is, how can we work better in harmony? And is that important? And it's okay if it's not. If this isn't a place where that's working for you, then we're standing in the way of your success. And frequently that happens. Now, because we're in a period in this country where there's a lot of divisiveness, that seems to generate a lot of negative energy. We have 2 wars going on at least. And we have high interest rates, we have high gas prices, we have excess food problems. So people are struggling to make ends meet. We've lost over 14,000 government workers in all sorts of areas, from national parks to national security. Okay, it's not whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it sure is creating stress for those people.
You touched upon the generations.
Yes.
We were talking about Gen Z and millennials, and then Gen X, boomers, the silent generation, thinking very differently about the workplace, and then being in it, quote unquote, for ourselves versus the greater good. There's a lot of conflict around that. Right. How do we start to harmonize? Or is there a path that might get a little worse before it gets better?
If we aren't willing to have an intelligent conversation with people that don't believe the same as we will continue that divide. We need to be careful of where we get our information from. In a former life, we would get information from a newspaper. Well, newspapers are not so popular in America. So we have people who favor a certain bent, who follow the news in that bent, whether they consider it conservative, middle, or liberal. And when they're on that path, because of what's going on with information technology, you're getting more and more messages that support your system of belief or system of interest. And therefore, you don't have enough time for some of the other stuff. And because it's something you don't agree with, you don't want to pay attention to it. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable. But at the same time, not to be so bigoted and stiff-necked that we cannot sit down and have an intelligent conversation with people who don't feel the same way we do. Now that's challenging because you have to have your act together. You actually have to have the facts in order to discuss. We need to have a conversation, not a confrontation. Okay? And so what happens is on the way to having a conversation, we end up with a confrontation about somebody that doesn't have all the facts. Now, because of my legal background, I'm pretty strong on that. If you don't have the damn facts together, then we have probably not a very even playing field for conversation. So I always say a couple of things. Are you willing to have an intelligent conversation? And what did you learn? In business, whether it's large or small, owners are on a path. And part of that path is successful and some of it isn't. It's easy not to think about it or to think only about it when things are good. When you've made a decision and it didn't work out, it's easy to blame somebody else, first of all, not yourself. And blame the information was faulty, the situation was faulty, the people weren't whatever it is. My question is, what did you learn? Always, and it's good to have somebody to kind of have that conversation with, but sometimes you've got to look in the mirror and say, what did I learn? Because whatever the circumstance, it was a great teacher. Even if the person, for example, in a dating situation is not the person that you thought they were, then the question is, what did you learn? You learn not to attract those kind of people. So when they show up again in your life, you can go, thank you for showing up. I don't need to spend much time with you. Now, by the way, if you don't get the lesson, don't worry. You'll get another chance at it, okay? Those same people will show up again. That same circumstance will show up again. Yeah. And you get chances to learn the same damn lesson over and over again. I don't mind making mistakes. I just don't like to make the same one more than once. And so young entrepreneurs or early entrepreneurs have a high level of enthusiasm. Generally, they're undercapitalized and don't know it. And then they start running into trouble. And then they truck around and they talk to their friends who don't know a whole lot more but can sympathize with them. So they're sitting down, having a conversation about something at work, but other people are sympathizing and they didn't learn a thing. Okay? Yes. So the answer then becomes, well, what is the lesson I was supposed to learn? Well, I didn't get enough facts. The facts weren't accurate. And you and I had an event a couple of years ago where you were thinking about acquiring a business, and we went through all of the numbers in a learning process. And the lesson was that was a great lesson, painful, a little bit pricey, but not crazy. And then the other thing was you were able to turn that situation upside down, take a position that was offered to you at 2 or 3 times what your compensation was at number 1, going to number 2, and a lot more freedom. So that's a great lesson.
It was.
And I think I'm just a fly on the wall, but I did provide some guidance on that. And I think it provided an education in how to look at a business deal a little differently or a little less emotionally. And also to learn how to negotiate. Okay, and it turns out you just say, well, this deal isn't going to work out, so we'll go on down the road, which takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. One of the things that we minimize with small business, and particularly women-owned business sometimes, is the failure to honor the courage to be in that business. And small businesses sometimes get stuck because they're doing the same thing over and over again for 10 to 20 years, and you look back and you say, well, how did it all work out? Do you now have a tremendous amount of wealth? Do you have a retirement? And they've got relatively little for the effort they put in. Let's look at the end game and say, where do we want to be? And let's figure out a path forward. And that sometimes takes a little coaching. It takes a sense of humor as well.
Yes. And I will forever be grateful to you for that experience about 2.5 years ago, because I came at it very emotionally and I was kind of a mental wreck. And you talk about being in the activity to then prevent a breakthrough in your personal life. And I think I was stuck in that cycle, in that loop, and you showed me the mirror in my relationships, in business, in the negotiations that I was going through. The patterns were all the same, and you were able to unlock that in me within a few months, and that I will forever be grateful for.
Well, I think we owe that to each other in all businesses. When we have a gift, and you have a gift, you have a great creative gift and engaging with people, obviously with your listenership, who look to you for information, confirmation, sympathy, and information. So we have a gift. one, do we even understand our gift? It's not necessarily just for us. We are in a business of taking our greatest strengths and helping other people to share them, not in a greed way, not in an exuberant, watch me go, but in a shared experience that benefits both, so it's symbiotic. And frequently it goes the other way. One person gains and one person loses. When I was doing a lot of mergers and acquisition work, I would always say to the client, this is the way I see the deal. If you want it the other way, we just turn the pieces of paper around. Because it's not about me winning. It used to be when I was a younger person.
Sure.
There's no winning in that. The best way to win is when both people can win. Or you say, this isn't working out. And it takes a great deal of courage to walk away from a deal that looks pretty good, that you put a lot of emotion into at the end of the day. And when you don't have the confidence that the next turn on the road will be a positive one, or you're going down a dead end, okay? And at this stage, there are really relatively few dead ends. On the other side, it's important to keep a couple of things straight. One is your thirst for knowledge. Two is your health. And frankly, sometimes I find clients are so committed to their business that they don't even have time to go to the dentist, okay? Not that they want to go to the dentist, but it's an example of putting it off and coming up with rationalizations and generalization and general bullshit for why it isn't, okay? I think we need to be sensitive to that in our relationships in companies and in relationships with others. We are on a journey. It has a destination. The destination is not one that people look forward to, but it's part of the price for living. And of course, as I get older, the first thing I do is I redefine older as being 10 years older than I am now, okay? And so I think what happens along the journey, commit yourself to the work, commit yourself to learning, commit yourself to making the same mistake only once, and find folks on your journey willing to communicate and are honest with their communication. You may not like it, but it's best to have what I call a competency team around you, particularly when things aren't going so lovely. And make sure they're interdisciplinary. That would be helpful. Our problem is not knowledge. I have a friend that said to me the other day, well, you know, Michael, all the knowledge in the world doubles every 2 years. Got to think about that. All the knowledge in the world doubles every 2 years. So our problem is not knowledge. Our problem is knowledge overload. So now the question is, how do we take the knowledge and bring it together without getting confused over all this research?
And on that sense of so much knowledge, an abundance of knowledge, a question from the audience that I have is signal versus noise. That's something Steve Jobs talks about a lot. How do you shut out the noise and decide where to focus your time and energy when there's so much abundance?
That's always a challenge for all entrepreneurs because there's so much traffic and so much noise that if you're in Boston, New York, California, you're in a lot of traffic jams, particularly in California between 3 and 6 o'clock, okay? We have super highways, but they're not going anywhere. So in business, the traffic and noise needs to be tempered with your discipline so you don't get distracted from the task. It's like when you're sitting there and somebody comes in and says, can I interrupt you for a second? They've already interrupted you. The answer is no, okay? But most of us, they say, the other way to hide it is to say, I could use your help on this. And because some of us are helpers, particularly a certain gender, women, whatever, their support helpers, they go to the help. And sometimes it's important to be who you are in that moment. Where there's a cry for help is not necessarily an emergency. Because somebody else's emergency is not yours, but they want to make it yours, okay? Because they're unsettled. And so when you buy into that, one of the things that happens over time is you get more of those coming to you, okay? So, you know, to those who are firefighters, there's more fires, even if they're false fires, okay? Even if there's only smoke, or there's no smoke, but there might be smoke, which is really what they're saying, okay? So now the question is, what is the best way to do that? And I've suggested many times to owners, first of all, identify your priorities and try not to do more than 3 a day. And so what happens is you get the inbox with all that stuff or the emails, like the idea that you have to respond to it. Well, it turns out that effective leaders really don't They want to get 2 or 3 things done in the morning and 2 or 3 things done in the afternoon. And you have to be disciplined. You have to know your staff know that. If I'm going to go through my emails from 7:30 to 8, that's not a good time to call me. Okay? The other thing is be careful how you organize your resources to be functionally effective. In other words, if you're the only one, then you're going to be the center of attraction, good, bad, or indifference. So sometimes when you delegate, you need to be clear as to what is those roles and responsibilities and expectations. This is super important, particularly when you're hiring people. Okay? So if I was a candidate to be hired by somebody and they offered me a position, what they don't know is I actually have 3 other positions that I've been offered. So my key question would be this: Mr. Owner or Miss Owner, tell me, if I took this job, what are the results you would like to see achieved in the next 90 days? That'll tell you a lot about what's going on. Now, most people that I say that to, that are recruiting owners and others, they haven't really figured out what the objective of that person is. They say, well, I need an administrative person, I need a salesperson, I need a manufacturing person, even a middle or senior one. And I say, well, what is it they would do within the first 90 days if they were the right person? You tell me. And I'll tell you what, if you don't have the answer, don't worry, because they're going to figure it out for themselves. And then they're going to do that thing. And then in 90 days, when you're talking about them and doing a performance review, and you're saying, well, I wanted you to do this and this, they're going to say, wait a minute, I did these, and other things, and I think I did them pretty well. And you're thinking, where the hell did they come up with that? Yeah. The answer is it filled the void of the lack of knowledge and expectations. So we ought to think about that in our lives a little more. Is what is the expectation? Have we done any kind of work in communicating that? And by the way, did they actually hear what we said? Because sometimes what they hear and what you said are a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it's all about effective communication and leadership.
That's huge. And especially for people listening, maybe you're not an entrepreneur, maybe you're someone who's in a corporation, an organization, and you're looking for a new job. I constantly, as a sales rep in front of people, basically I feel like a therapist, helping people find their next thing. And that's a great thing to ask.
Well, it's important. First of all, it changes the nature of the conversation. By the way, when they don't know the answer and you ask them, you say, well, if I took this position, do you think we could address that early on in order to ensure that your expectations are met and I'm clear about my role? Because I've done a lot of this stuff before, but different people have different ideas. So what's really important to me to be successful here at X is what you think is the most important thing that this position can do to improve your effectiveness and profitability. It's a start.
Yeah. It's gold. That's amazing. I think all of this knowledge that you have, you were saying packaging it in digestible ways. People only have an attention span of 6 to 9 minutes. Thank you if you're listening beyond that in this episode. How do you think the best way is to capture all this knowledge?
I think a number of years ago during COVID, Tyler and Tanya in this business asked me, said, if anything happened to you, how would we capture all this knowledge? So I said, well, I've been working on that for about 20 or so years. I haven't really had the time to do it. But at the end of the day, one of my missions was to develop a learning tool for other people in the business. And so I developed a series of videos. The first one was 571 finished minutes. The other one was 753 finished minutes. But the key was not the length of them. There's a study out that talks about knowledge in a digital world. And one of the things that impressed me was that the average working listener can only absorb information within 7 to 9 minutes, particularly people in the workplace. So if you're going to give them a little homework, make sure it doesn't take more than 7 to 9 minutes, okay? So what I developed was a storyboard of a whole lot of areas. One was called Survey Mastery with Michael, and the other was called the Toolkit. The survey was how you provide knowledge to a client in discovery. And those were packaged in 7 to 8 minute modules with the idea that our staff out in the field, if they came across a problem with a client, they could go out the parking lot, turn on their phone, and they could pick up the index of any of those and they could figure it out in 6 minutes. And then they'd go back. The toolkit was about 110 different subject areas they understand the client needed, but they didn't know how to proceed. So they could just go and put in the subject, and they could pull it up, and there's a whole 6-7 minute video on the whole thing from A to Z. And then they could go back and discuss it more intelligently with a client. Now, going back to your story, I believe knowledge has to be packaged with the idea that the learner, whether it's a young, middle, or older learner, can absorb quickly. They can also recall quickly and not go too far. So there's a subject area, and there might be 8 or 9 modules within that. Fine. Let them go through that at their own pace. If they forgot something, they should be able to retrieve it. If they can capture it without using their desktop computer or their laptop on their phone, that's even better. Or they can listen to it while they're going to work. So I know that they can't sit down through a lecture. They can't listen to me for 30 to 45 minutes and really stay attuned. But maybe they can drop in every 7 or so minutes and pick up that knowledge. So I think small bites, targeted to information that what I call knowledge ready to go, in a way that works for the client. And when it doesn't work, they should be able to figure out why it doesn't work. And then I did a whole series for salespeople, dealing with objections. And that seemed to be the most popular video that I ever did, because salespeople are always encountering no. And so then I always said the best salesmen people in the world understood that no means not today, not that you're a failure, because they do take it that way. So I did a whole series on dealing with objections and how to overcome objections. So that seems to be the one most popular.
Which I love. No means not right now. When we think about all this knowledge that you're transferring to others, what do you wish to leave behind as a legacy to the next generation?
Be on a quest for knowledge. Leadership is a two-way street. Play to win. That you need to be both a master student and a master teacher. And you have to maintain your sense of humor. Because we all take this stuff too seriously. Okay?
Which you do well. You have a gift for coaching people.
Yes.
I was lucky to be one of those, am lucky to be one of those people. You've talked to politicians, to world leaders, to athletes, to business people, and everything in between, which I think is so amazing. And you're so humble about it too. What have you learned from this experience today? You always end with that question with the people you're coaching.
I think today is about sharing information, learning about a life journey, commitment to a strong work ethic, identifying your gifts, sharing those gifts with those that are willing to listen, and the importance of an intelligent conversation. We tend to avoid those. One, for lack of knowledge, not having all the facts, believing everything we hear on 7 minutes of news, which is not news, nor is it helpful, okay? Being a critical thinker, learning from others. Also, when you encounter folks that seem to be on a different path that they want you or they suggest you must be on, reject that thinking. Have courage. Understand you make mistakes. Try not to make the same one more than once. Create a competency team going forward, and be willing to help others, because there's lots of stuff out there that they could use some help on, but only if they're willing. What do I know?
Well, thank you so much for your time today, your wisdom, your lessons that you've brought to the table for my life and for the audience today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I so appreciate having you on my show after a couple years in the making. Thank you so much for having me today, Tyler and Tanya. Your dad, your father, created such a legacy that Michael has been telling me about the past couple of days, and I'm so sorry to hear about his passing.
Thank you.
Most recently. I've heard so many wonderful things about you two, your siblings, older, younger, and I want to know more about your dynamic, just as siblings, as people. What is that like?
Well, when I was young, he was such a brat to me that I would actually climb out my bedroom window to get away so I would not have to go in the living room where him and his friends were. Right?
I don't remember any of that.
Oh. But since we've been working together for so long, it has definitely morphed into one of the best relationships I've ever had. Where if I was going to call someone and I needed something for me or my kids, Uncle Tai Tai would be my first call.
I don't think that Tanya and I would have ever developed the the personal side if it wasn't for the professional side. As kids, we just didn't have a lot of things that we had in common. But professionally, all of the things that I either am really bad at or can't do or don't want to do, Tanya's really good at them. And I think that the things that she would prefer not to do,
100%.
I think that that she knows that I have the experience in the business to be able to communicate at a high level for those things. And obviously the trust is the most important part, and that's inherent in the relationship. Luckily, along the way, we didn't do anything to break that trust with each other.
Right.
And once we started working together, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And obviously, the winning, of course, helps that. And our company's been winning year after year now for a while. But all those things just build the relationship. They help to build the relationship. And thank God it happened, because I don't think if Tanya never moved to Chicago that we would have had this relationship.
No,
that's for sure.
certainly not.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And especially in times like this, it's so nice to have each other, not only in the personal aspect, but in the business aspect. And International Services, Inc. Has been an amazing business focusing on consulting with small businesses throughout the country. What is one thing that the business has taught you since you've started? And then what's one thing your father has instilled in you?
The one thing our father taught us is how to work hard.
Yeah.
Like work ethic, and we try to preach this to everybody. I still have friends that I've known my whole life that it's hard for them to get up in the morning and go to work. Tanya and I have never had that one day in our career. You get up because almost every day we're excited to go to work, but at the very least we know we have a responsibility to be at work, and working hard has never been hard. And we attribute that to both of our parents. But our dad certainly, he was a believer in he was the first one here. He wasn't really the last one to leave a lot, but he was always one of the first ones here, and he led by example.
Something that we learned from the business and that has morphed over time as my father has stepped away is if we focus on the story of the client, the revenue will follow. And I think that's one of the best things. Tyler and I get to speak to so many clients and see what we've been able to do for them, what they've been able to achieve and earn after us being there, that it is awesome to the point that you're excited to hear about their stories. And this past weekend at our father's funeral, we had a handful of clients there that we got to hear like how much we changed their lives.
Wow.
About a month ago, one of our best clients we've ever had, the Sparadakis family, came in, and they're ready to transition their company from the mother and father that have run the company and built the company and transition to their younger kids. And they had said, please come and mentor them. So we had their sons and daughters here with us, like learning from us, talking about work ethic and things like that. Some of those are like some really pound your chest moments when we remember like what we're working so hard for.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful because you've been through that yourself in the succession plan.
Yep.
And that just full circle.
Yep, and I think that's something that our small clients don't have, is we have the benefit of being able to go to our tax attorneys and say, how do we do a tax or a buyout and make sure it's going well? What has other clients not done properly, and there have been problems because of that? So when we transitioned from our father to us, we didn't have some of those problems because of all the expertise and the people like Michael Rabinowitz around us to kind of help guide us.
Yeah, I call it we're spoiled with opportunity.
Definitely.
Right? Like there are so many unbelievable professionals that we have around us and people that have been here for a long period of time that we trust. And I just don't think our clients have that.
Yeah.
For us to be able to show how we can create value for them, it's just by having those experiences, those conversations, and it's been a fun run. It's been an unbelievable fun ride, and the beautiful part about this business is, as much as we do accomplish, we feel like there's so much more to accomplish still.
And I heard from Michael, you're more the visionary from the sales background, and you are the numbers girl. So talk to me a little bit about your expertise within the business and the vision that you have for the future.
So the expertise is, so I was very blessed that I did have a lot of time with my father where we would go over the numbers, understanding where the money is coming from, where it needs to be put, how to allocate money. We do something with our client called a CMR, it's the cash manager report. The only way to make that grow is understanding what money you're spending and why, so we spend a lot of time with that.
To be a full-service business development firm is that every time that we pick up a telephone to communicate with a client and they have a defined deliverable want, that we need to get to the point that we could deliver upon that want. We're not there yet. There's a lot of things we do. There's also things we don't do yet. So from the vision side, it's just about figuring out how that we keep getting better at the deliverable, what our product is, and keep expanding what it is that we're really good at, that we can deliver upon those wants. Because there's so many things that we can do to get better, stronger, faster. You know, there's so many analogies, but there's a lot of things left to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And a lot of my listeners are running small businesses or working within small businesses. What is a common theme that you see when you're analyzing these businesses that small businesses nowadays are really lacking?
Information. Information, time, experience. You know, we call it a sphere of influences because there's a lot of this where if you haven't been taught something, then it's hard for me to hold you accountable towards something that you don't know how to do. And that's why our clients work more in the business than on the business. And that's what we see every single day. So our job is to make sure that we empower them with information that they can make and decisions that effectuate change that impact profitability within their corporate culture. And that sometimes is harder than others because a lot of times, I mean, people are these clients that we meet with, they're very proud. They are brilliant within what it is that they do, but typically they're non-entrepreneurs. Typically, they didn't go to business school. They went through the school of hard knocks, and they're making it, right? Our job is just to figure out how that they can shorten those cycles, that they can get a better return for the amount of time that they're investing into their company, and how to move them forward for their business and their career, that they can look at their employees, whether it's 20, 30, 50 employees that they have, and they can paint a picture, a path for a direction that they know that there's a future involved for all those employees and their families.
That's beautiful. And from a risk standpoint and the numbers standpoint, how are you really guiding these principles that are leading towards success in their businesses?
So what we do different than other companies is we're physically there helping the client. So we actually work with them on their cash flow statement, that CMR, going through every single transaction that goes through their company and make sure it's being allocated properly. We're looking at things. It's amazing how many clients have not changed pricing since before COVID.
Right.
Which is something that needs to be done. They typically will go and look at the contractor that's down the street, make their product a couple of dollars less and think that that's a good decision. Well, we show them that there are so many other numbers that need to be looked at before making pricing. That's a great example of all the things that the clients don't know that they're not doing. They're really good at being plumbers or whatever their thing is, but they're not focusing on how to hold on to the money and how to do things like that. So we go through item by item and help them. We become the trusted advisor that's at their office, having those conversations over and over again, and not making them change, but showing them if they change some certain things in their daily process, it'll be easier for them and they'll hold on to more money at the end.
No, it's the what's in it for me. The why do people change, right? And almost always there has to be a reason why somebody changes. If they're going to come in and adjust the way they've been doing something, that they've been doing something for 20 years, they have to see the reason of why they want to change. And what we're able to implement into businesses is the reason why. It shows creates more longevity in the business, it creates more security in the business, and it shows a path moving forward that these clients can have confidence in what they're doing.
And I think the interesting thing is when people think of consulting, they're like, okay, advice. But what you do differently is that you're actually in there solving problems and taking them from point A to point Z. And I think that differentiates you and is so important in the value that you bring to these businesses. And then they see that tenfold. I'm sure a lot of these clients, like you said, the succession planning, that's really exciting. But what's a specific case study that you can share with the audience that was like, okay, wow, this is really amazing and this is working?
We had a client, is Echo Valley Meats, and it's a fourth generation farmer that goes meat to table. And we first engaged with Dave over 10 years ago. Dave was on Shark Tank and didn't get a deal. First time through, he didn't get a deal, went through his whole business process, didn't get a deal. He actually was invited to come back to Shark Tank and did end up getting a deal. But the deal, what he said to us, is just through the first time that he was on Shark Tank, he said, Tyler, I can't give you credit for getting me on Shark Tank because we had nothing to do with it. But he said that he took in somewhere, and I can't remember the exact number, it was between $700,000 and $900,000 of business after the first time that the episode aired. And he said that he had the infrastructure in place in his business that he could take on that type of revenue, which, if I remember right, was close to double what his revenue was at the time. He said, I had the infrastructure in place that I didn't skip a beat. So like from a publicity, like from the most public one, that's probably the most public, but there's so many stories. Yeah. And that's the beautiful part about this business, it's the stories.
Yeah. Elwan was at our dad's funeral this past weekend. So it is a relationship, and I think those are the ones where when they come back, are just amazing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And Michael was telling me about the celebration of life, the funeral, and how many people were there and that your dad impacted. I did not know him personally or at all, but I just heard the stories of Michael talking about him, and he seemed like an amazing person and a true visionary, and obviously set the stage here for us today. And I think that's in itself just amazing and memorializing his story, even just with this episode.
He was truly unique. He was a unicorn in a lot of ways. Not perfect by any means, but the one part that was perfect is he had a big heart. Yeah. He had a big heart. He loved helping people in every way, shape, and form. And
he saw all of his employees as family.
Yes.
Which is something we're definitely carrying on.
I can feel that just walking around the office today. Everyone knows each other's name. It feels like everyone's been here for 20 plus years, if
a lot of them have.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it just shows. I can feel it being an outsider coming in. It just like feels great to be in this environment and this culture, and the people are really dedicated and care about what they do, which is all you want in a business.
Thank you for saying that.
So,
It means a lot.
Yeah, no, seriously. So thank you so much. And if there's something that you're going to leave with the audience today about small businesses, what would that be? What is something encouraging that we can leave with the audience?
Our father definitely taught us never stop learning. Every day is a new opportunity to learn something. But the part that I would say is ask questions. Like even asking, one of the things that we try to do is we ask the same question to a lot of different types of people because we don't all hear the information the same. Like sometimes Michael would answer a question and it just doesn't resonate with me, with the way that I process information. But if I ask that exact same question to 4 other people, I guarantee that even though it's the same core concept, that it's going to be something that it has a better penetration point, and I'm going to understand the why. And so like to keep asking questions, I think you show that you're bored in something if you're not asking questions.
That's a really good point.
I would say it goes in connection with Tyler of being coachable. So if you're going to take in information and actually receive it instead of just waiting for the person who's speaking to stop talking, then you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. So I think the clients that definitely do the best with us are the ones that are coachable, wanting to learn, wanting to ask the questions and grow.
Who are receptive.
Yes.
That's so important.
Yep.
And what I've learned from this podcast over the past 7 years is, at first I was like, I'm going to get really good at communication, but then I realized I'm actually getting good at asking questions and being a good listener. And I have to say that is a true value and skill of a good leader. Yep. And I can see that within you both, which is amazing. And I can tell that you listen to each other really well. And not all siblings can say that. Not all business partners can say that. So that is something to be proud of as well, just within that.
Some days better than others.
Yep.
I
made him sit in like 3 hours of accounting meetings today, so I think he's done with me. Done with me.
Yes, but it is it just shows how like powerful you are as a family, but as a corporation and as business partners, which is really amazing to see.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
It's truly an
And
honor.
yes, no, I so appreciate your time as well, your expertise. And so thank you.
No, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to the Rapport by LilyGrace podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe, leave questions and comments. I always love responding. And thank you so much. I appreciate you.